Arabella's 18th birthday was meant to be the highlight of the year, a day that would forever be etched in the memories of everyone in the village. The air was thick with excitement as her family prepared to celebrate her coming of age. The house, transformed into a festive haven, was decorated with twinkling lights, fragrant flowers, and cheerful music that invited everyone to join in the joy. Arabella, radiant in her princess-like dress, was surrounded by her loved ones, basking in the affection of her family and friends. Her mother Benny and her older sister Lily were full of pride, their faces alight with happiness as they watched Arabella revel in her special day. Dan, her father, was the epitome of joy, striking playful poses for the photographers who snapped shots to capture every precious moment. "Come on, Arabella, open this one first," Lily urged, pointing excitedly to a particularly eye-catching gift amidst the pile of presents. But Arabella's attention drifted. Among the colorful stack of beautifully wrapped gifts, one in particular drew her gaze. It wasn't the largest or the brightest, but something about it intrigued her. The gift was wrapped in old-fashioned paper, tied with an antique ribbon, evoking a sense of nostalgia and mystery, as though it belonged to another era. "This one stands out to me. Can I open it, Mom?" Arabella asked, her voice filled with excitement and curiosity. Benny smiled warmly. "Of course, my dear, whichever you prefer." Everyone leaned in, their eyes fixed on the unusual gift as Arabella slowly began to peel back the layers of wrapping paper. Beneath it she uncovered a peculiar box, made of wood and metal, featuring an odd mechanism that seemed unlike any ordinary lock or clasp. "What is it?" Lily asked, her brow furrowing as she leaned closer to examine the strange object. Arabella ran her fingers over the box, her intrigue deepening. "I don't know, it looks like some sort of box, but it's so old and strange." She gently traced the worn edges of the object. Benny's smile faltered, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "Be careful, Arabella, it smells odd," she warned, her voice laced with worry. But Arabella, driven by an overwhelming curiosity, ignored her mother's caution. With a soft click, the box sprang open. For a brief moment Arabella caught a glimpse of something inside, but then, as if it had a mind of its own, the box snapped shut. Her eyes widened in shock. Before anyone could react, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air, freezing everyone in place. Arabella crumpled to the floor, her body collapsing like a rag doll. The once vibrant celebration fell into an eerie silence, the joyful music halting abruptly, leaving only a haunting stillness behind. "No, my baby, no!" Benny cried, her voice breaking as she rushed to Arabella's side. Desperation painted her face as she cradled her lifeless daughter, her hands trembling. Dan, his face drained of color, knelt beside Arabella, his hands shaking as he attempted to revive her. "Arabella, please wake up," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. His efforts were in vain. The room stood still, unable to comprehend the horror that had just unfolded. Dan's hand pressed against Arabella's chest, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he felt a faint pulse, a spark of hope. But it vanished just as quickly, leaving only the cold emptiness of loss. Amid the chaos and confusion, no one noticed where the mysterious box had gone. Benny, frantic and panicked, dashed to find a phone, but to her horror, the old rotary phone in the corner was dead. She rushed to the doors, only to discover that they were locked, the windows barred. There was no escape. "Dan, the phone's dead," she said in a strained whisper. "I can't get out." Dan's face twisted in fear, but his determination began to take over. He started CPR, but Arabella remained unresponsive. "We need help," he shouted, turning to the guests. "Is there a doctor here, anyone?" His plea was met with silence, panic sweeping through the room. Benny, now frantic, spotted the old phone again and tried it once more, only to find it still useless. Desperately, she tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The fear was growing, suffocating them all. A whispered voice cut through the tension. "It must be that cursed box. It's the only thing that changed everything. Maybe it has something to do with what happened to Arabella." "What if it's cursed?" another voice murmured, as the crowd exchanged nervous glances. As if on cue, a piercing scream rang through the hall, this time from a young girl, no older than 10. Driven by curiosity, she had discovered the box and, as if drawn by some unseen force, figured out the mechanism. It opened briefly before snapping shut, just like it had with Arabella. The little girl collapsed to the ground, lifeless. "Oh my God, she opened it, that cursed box!" a woman cried in horror. Panic erupted. Some screamed, Others huddled together, whispering wild speculations of the box's evil origins. "It's the work of something dark, something unholy," the priest, a close friend of Arabella's family, spoke, rising above the chaos. "We must pray, come together, and ask God to protect us." As the crowd reluctantly complied, fear and disbelief clouded the air. The box remained in the corner, an ominous presence that no one dared approach. Yet still, Dan, Arabella's father, was consumed with rage. "I want to know who brought that cursed thing to my daughter's party," he demanded, scanning the room. The guests fell silent, no one daring to speak. After an agonizing moment, one woman nervously pointed a finger. "I think it was him," she said, accusing a quiet man in the corner. "He's always pretending to be so pious, dealing with strange things." The accused man stood up, defensive. "I didn't bring it. I hardly even know the family." Accusations flew. Paranoia gripped everyone. Everyone was a suspect. Ethel, a guest who had smiled nervously when the little girl had shown interest in the box, was now under scrutiny. "Why were you laughing?" someone asked her. Ethel stammered, her voice trembling. I didn't know what would happen." Tensions mounted until the priest stepped forward again, raising his hands to silence the crowd. "Calm down. These accusations will get us nowhere. We are here for Arabella. We must not let fear divide us." Yet before they could regain their composure, Patrick, a strong man who worked in the fields, stood up. "I'm going to deal with that cursed box," he said, his voice filled with defiance. "It's only harmed women. With a man it'll be different." "Patrick, don't do it," the crowd cried, but he ignored their warnings. The priest stepped in front of him, urging caution. "Son, strength alone won't save us here. We don't know the power of that box." But Patrick, fueled by a blind resolve, pushed past the priest and took the box into his hands. As he opened it, the room held its breath. The outcome was instantaneous. Patrick fell to the ground, lifeless. Screams filled the air as guests scrambled to the doors and windows, desperate to escape, but it was too late. They were trapped. "We have to destroy that box," someone cried, their voice shaking with fear. The call to destroy it spread like wildfire. Yet no one dared touch it. Finally, Paul, the village lumberjack, stepped forward, his strength and skill with tools well known. "I'll handle it," he said, determination in his voice. With a heavy wooden table leg in hand, Paul swung at the box, striking it with all his might. Again and again he hit it, but the box remained unscathed. "This doesn't make sense," Paul muttered, looking at his hands, covered in bruises and sweat. "I've felled entire trees, but this thing—" A wave of fear washed over the crowd. It was clear now, the box was no ordinary object, and they were powerless against it. The nightmare was only beginning, and no one knew how to stop it. The room was heavy with dread, and despair hung in the air as they realized their worst fear. Paul's strength had failed to destroy the cursed box. It sat there mocking them, an enigma that resisted every attempt to rid themselves of it. Someone in the crowd whispered, "It must be bewitched, something diabolical," and the murmurs spread like wildfire. The box exuded malevolence, its silent presence unsettling everyone. Then, a voice rose above the panic. "We need to burn it. Fire purifies everything," someone shouted, their voice filled with determination. The crowd, desperate to find a solution, scrambled to gather chairs, tables, and anything that could burn, forming a pile in the center of the hall. A guest, known for his habit of smoking during breaks, produced his lighter and set the makeshift pyre ablaze. The flames licked the air, crackling and filling the room with an acrid scent, causing many to cover their noses. "Who will throw the box into the fire?" another voice asked. Silence followed as no one dared approach the box. Finally, someone grabbed a broom and with trembling hands carefully nudged the box toward the flames, avoiding direct contact. Everyone held their breath, watching, their hearts pounding. "Let it burn," someone shouted, their voice shaking but filled with hope. The crowd began to cheer, convinced that this was the end of their nightmare. But then, something horrifying happened. Through the roaring flames they could still see the box completely unscathed, as if mocking their efforts. A chill ran down their spines. "It can't be," someone whispered, their voice filled with terror. Panic erupted once again. People scrambled for the exits, only to find them locked. Some collapsed in fear while others began to cry, unable to fathom what had just happened. In the midst of this chaos, Zipporah, the oldest and wisest woman in the village, stood tall, her voice cutting through the noise. "This didn't just appear out of nowhere. Someone here knows something," she declared with conviction. Her eyes scanned the crowd. This curse didn't come by chance. Someone here is responsible, and I know that person is among us." Her words hit like a thunderclap. Whispers spread and nervous glances were exchanged. Zipporah, unwavering, looked around at the crowd and called for volunteers. "Let's find the culprit. If they won't speak, I'll make them," she said, inspiring a few men to step forward. Soon, an impromptu group was formed, some guests detained, protesting their innocence, while others hid in fear, certain they'd be accused next. "Don't let anyone escape. If they're hiding, they have something to hide," Zipporah ordered, her voice stern and resolute. But the priest, who had been observing the rising tension, stepped forward, his voice calm yet firm. "Let's be careful. Accusations without proof will lead us down the wrong path," he warned. His plea for caution hung in the air, but Zipporah remained resolute. "We must act, we cannot wait any longer," she retorted. The tension reached a boiling point, and eventually Zipporah's group had gathered all suspects, each one denying any involvement. It wasn't until only Shem, the young man from the village, remained that Zipporah's suspicion grew. "Shem, show me your invitation," she demanded, her tone sharp. Shem's eyes cast downward, muttered, "I don't have one. I snuck in because I wanted to be here." Zipporah nodded, as though she already knew his answer. Her eyes hardened. "I know your secret, Shem. You brought mariachi musicians to declare your love to Arabella, but she rejected you in front of everyone. That's why you brought this cursed box, to seek revenge." Shem, trembling, spoke with clarity. "Yes, it's true. I loved her, and I was hurt. But I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be close to her on her special day." Despite his words, Zipporah proposed that Shem open the box as a final test. Some protested, arguing it was too dangerous, but others, gripped by fear, urged him on. "If you have nothing to hide, nothing will happen to you," Zipporah said confidently. The crowd watched in tense silence as Shem hesitantly approached the box, hands shaking. The moment his fingers brushed the box, the room seemed to hold its breath. But to everyone's shock, the box opened and closed without incident. Shem stood there, unharmed, staring at the box in disbelief. "Impossible," Zipporah murmured, her suspicions growing. Unless you are the culprit," she said, her eyes narrowing on Shem. Arabella's mother, Benny, stepped forward, her face pale, her voice breaking. "How could you, Shem? After everything," she cried, her grief palpable. Dan, Arabella's father, stormed toward Shem with fury in his eyes, but others intervened, holding him back before the situation could escalate. Shem, trembling, raised his hands. "I swear I didn't do it. I don't know why the box didn't harm me, but I swear I didn't bring this curse." His voice was desperate, but the room was filled with suspicion. The crowd murmured, trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. "Maybe the box only harms those with bad intentions," someone suggested. "Maybe it recognizes its true owner," another speculated. Theories flowed, each one more uncertain than the last. In the midst of the confusion, the priest, with a calmness that seemed out of place in the panic, called out, "Wait, something is wrong here." Shem didn't put his hands inside the box like the rest. That could be the key. His voice cut through the chaos, but fear and doubt still clouded the air. "I'll open it," the priest said, unwavering, "but I won't touch it with my hands." The crowd gasped in horror, urging him not to, but the priest remained resolute. "We need to know what is inside this box once and for all, to end this nightmare." With a mixture of faith and determination, the priest approached the box, opening it carefully without making contact. The room fell silent, waiting, holding its breath. Slowly, the box revealed its contents, a faded old book or album. The crowd stared in confusion, some unable to believe it. "A book?" someone asked, disbelief in their voice. "It must be cursed, or enchanted," another speculated. The priest, convinced there was more to the mystery, carefully examined the book using a pair of tongs. The pages were old and yellowed, stuck together. After some effort, he pried one open. His face changed, and he quickly examined the other pages. A chilling realization hit him, and his voice grew urgent. "This is it! I know what happened to the victims, and I know who is responsible." The room fell into stunned silence as the priest revealed his discovery. He explained that the victims, when they opened the box, had touched the pages of the book, moistened their fingers to turn them, unknowingly ingesting arsenic that had been applied to the pages. The deadly chemical was responsible for their deaths. Benny, Arabella's mother, gasped in horror, clutching her chest. "Arsenic?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The priest nodded solemnly. "Whoever did this poisoned the pages, hoping that anyone who touched them would unknowingly ingest it." As the group absorbed the shock, Benny's eyes filled with tears. "But how could this happen? Who would do such a thing?" The priest, his voice soft but firm, revealed the final piece of the puzzle. "Lily, your daughter. She's the one responsible for all of this." A collective gasp filled the room. Benny and Dan's faces went pale as they realized the truth. The priest explained how Lily, filled with resentment after years of neglect and jealousy, had orchestrated this horrifying act of revenge. She had even secretly sought advice from Shem, who had been struggling to understand Lily's pain. Before anyone could respond, a scream echoed through the hall. "There she goes!" someone shouted. Lily had escaped. A frantic chase ensued, and though she was caught, the mystery surrounding her actions began to unravel. Benny and Dan, torn between their love for their daughter and the realization of her actions, knew that they had to confront the painful truths of their past.